will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving God, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. And the warning here from Paul to Timothy is avoid people like that. Do you think that's the world we're living in right now? If you read through that, if you've never seen those verses before, I think you and I can agree that that is the world that we live in. I've watched the moral slide take place over the last 20 to 30 years. As a matter of fact, Kayla and I were talking this morning. This message that I'm getting ready to share with you would have looked very different 20 years ago. Right? Because the things that are happening right now in our world, in our culture, were unimaginable 20 years ago. Right? You didn't have to think, like, the idea that the moral fabric of the family, of society, would be crumbling at the rate of which it is. But listen to me. So what happens now? What happens now? Because we're thinking, well, it can't get worse, right? Except we know, right, what happens at the end of the book. So we're seeing more and more homes move farther and farther and farther away from God's design. So last week, Caleb shared with us the verses just before this passage. I'm not going to read all the verses, but look back at verse 12. I'm going to start there, and I'm just going to list the things that Paul says should be part of the fabric of the home, should be part of the fabric of a man and woman in their marriage relationship. Compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another in love, forgiving each other. And in case you don't know what that means, he describes it for us as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And then he says, put on love. These characteristics guide us. These are the ones that we lean into. And we're going to find that if we do that it makes the next set of verses much easier to live out. See, without compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another, without those things actively working in our lives, it is very difficult to live out the next set of verses. So here we are at today's passage, okay? Here's the good news. I just have 2 points and 25 subpoints. Okay, so here we go. All right? Caleb read it. I'm going to read it again. It's going to come up on the screen. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives. Don't be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. Masters, treat your bondservants justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. Can we address the elephant in the room? I read the word submit, right? After the word wives. And there were some people in the room that went, no, not me. Not going to do it. I read the word bondservants. I read the word master. Right? And we go, what? What is happening here? What does this look like? I saw this quote recently, and I wrote it down, and I thought to myself, this is one of those times in the Christian life that's hard. Here's the quote. Everybody is a Christian until things get biblical. Everybody's a Christian until things get biblical. Right? Especially in the Southeast. You run into somebody, you know, you start having a conversation with you, they'll say, oh, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. Right? How many people have you met like that here? It's true. But part of the problem, this is the issue, is that we're uninformed, right? Or unable to understand the passage or the verse, or we just flat out don't like what it says. So let's dive in. Here we go. Instructions for family. Super practical today. Instructions for family. What does he say? Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Submit. Involving the recognition of an ordered structure of the home. Submission is not a popular word. Paul actually uses the same word in a parallel passage that is almost word for word what he writes to the church at Ephesus regarding the home structure. Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. So what is biblical submission? What does that look like? Biblical submission recognizes the husband as the head of the home. It's not something that's lorded over your wife. It's God's plan for the authoritative structure for the family so that there's no confusion about how things operate. Without a family structure, everybody would just do what they wanted, right? Everybody would be in charge. It would be like the book of Judges, right? And there didn't arise a prophet in Israel, and everybody did what was right in their own eyes. So God's not the author of confusion. He created this structure as our guide. Have you heard the phrase, the buck stops here, right? The buck stops here. In God's plan for the family, that person is the husband. Think of it this way. If you've played on a sports team, how many of you guys played sports in high school? All right? Okay, any Michael Jordans here? You didn't make the team? Okay, just one? Okay, all right? There's the point in the preseason when after tryouts, the team's picked, there's a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, you get ready to go the first game, coach comes in and coach says what? We need to pick a captain, right? We need to pick a captain. And so I don't know how it worked for you, but everybody on the teams that I played on, we kind of knew who that person was going to be. And what does that captain do? During practice, that captain's pushing everybody else, right? He kind of becomes that person under the coach. Coach comes to him and says, hey, listen, I'm noticing in the third and fourth quarter we're winded, so we're going to do some extra sprints, which everybody loves, right? No, nobody loves that. But the captain then becomes the person that says, hey, watch me. Come on, let's go. To the guy who's not getting it, we got to get after it. During the game, what does the captain do? He becomes the representative of the team on the field, right? So if there's a call that's is really bad, or if he misses a call, that captain's running over. Sometimes they got an armband on, sometimes they got a C on their chest. Sometimes they're just the biggest dude on the field, and it's pretty obvious it's them, right? That's God's design in the family. All right? That's God's design in the family. The husband is the captain of the family team. So submission doesn't mean that wives don't have an opinion or that a husband doesn't need to consider his wife in the decision-making process. That's not what this is saying at all. It's not my way or the highway, okay? In our family, okay, Lynn will look at me and she'll say, if it's like car-related, plumbing-related, electrically related, okay, she'll say, you go ahead and run with this, right? Hey, you got this. That's you, right? Now, I'm also fairly decent at interior design. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I've watched my share of shows on HGTV, okay? All right? But when it comes to those things, we make those decisions together. I was minding my own business the other day, just sitting there, doing absolutely nothing, and I get a picture of the new Sherwin-Williams paint collection. Just randomly pop ups on my phone. What do you think about these? I didn't know we were planning on repainting anything. Right? She wants a new mixer. I don't care. Red, turquoise, white. Buy the one you want. Right? We need to buy a car. Right? We need to buy a car. We were in a situation a few weeks ago. We were looking for a replacement car for one that had been totaled. And I was looking and striving, and I woke up one day, did my quiet time, we were driving to work, I said, that's it! I'm done! I'm going to cease striving. By the way, that's a really great biblical principle. Cease striving. And so I did. And then lo and behold, Lynn says to me, like 6 or 7 days later, did you see this car? I said, no, I haven't seen that car. Send it to me. Let me check it out. I didn't go, I'm the person who picks the cars, right? There's people like that. There's husbands like that. I do that. You don't. She sent me the car. I'm like, well, this is the car. I Kyle the guy. We work out the deal. We buy the car. Here, I read this. Being the head of the home means that God gives the husband the final authority to make a decision so the house runs in an orderly manner. It does not mean that the husband should selfishly use this power to get his way. So there's people in here who are married. Man, what a great reminder, right, guys? Wives, what a great reminder of the biblical picture that the family is supposed to be. There's some wannabe husbands in here, okay? I'm looking at one right now. He wants to be a husband. I already know that. There's some wannabe wives in here. Like, you don't have the gift of celibacy. You know that for sure. Hey, these are great principles to grasp. So number one, what is biblical submission? Under wives. Number two, do wives submit to everyone? Now, I debated whether or not to include this in here. But the world that we live in, I think, demands it. Colossians and Ephesians indicate that submission to your husband in both passages. Your husband, right? Here's the problem. Unfortunately, some men think every woman should submit to them. That's not what these verses are saying. You're not being asked to submit to all men, only your husband. If your husband and boss, okay, want you to do two different things, you need to follow your husband. Your relationship with him takes precedent over all of the other relationships. Genesis 2:24 clarifies that in case you were wondering. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh, right? That's not just talking about sex, it's talking about every aspect of our lives. For the younger couples in the room, one of the challenges that you're going to face is your parents, both sides, asking you to do things that conflict with what your spouse is asking of you. We've all been there, right? How about the big conversation after you first get married about where you're going to spend the holidays? Remember that one? Remember that one? What do you mean? You're not coming home for Christmas? Do you know it'll be the first time that you haven't been home for Christmas? I mean, how long did they think this was going to last, right? How about, are we going to live close to family? You're going to move where? That's an hour away. I don't even know. Right? How about that one? How about where the kids are going to go to school? Oh boy. I mean, you want to debate? Right? There's people in here, it's like, I'm putting my kids in public school. Oh, you are not putting my grandchildren in that filth. Right? You're like, Rich, you're being really dramatic. This is the stuff that's happening in our world right now. And you're in the middle. What are we going to let our children watch, eat, or do? We have a granddaughter. She's awesome. She's 7 months old. Okay? The other day at lunch, we had this awesome little strawberry parfait, right? And they're feeding my granddaughter on the one side of the table, and I'm like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to feed her some strawberry parfait. Except as I scooped it up and took it to her mouth, which was wide open, waiting for it to arrive, I could see my daughter-in-law in the back giving me the death ray stare. Don't you dare mess with her palate, right? Grandparents, you guys have been there, right? They don't get to watch TV, right? But she gets to watch soccer. I don't really understand that, and I'm not going to debate that. Will my wife work or have a job? I mean, these are all the things, right? Husbands, you need to take in all the information and consider the response of everyone involved before making the decision. I can tell you from my own life, okay? I was very dogmatic about some things when we first got married, and I really didn't care about what I I really didn't care about the fallout from my decision. Right? This is what we're going to do. This is my family. You have to be careful with that. You have to be careful with that. Ultimately, you are the head of the home, and you can politely decline their offer or suggestion, even if they offer to pay for it. Right? Because that's the hook. All right? There's some grandparents that are like living this up right now because it's true. Right? Number 2, husbands. Now, just in case you want to know, wives, I made sure to write as many things about the husbands as I did about the wife. Okay? You can look at it, there's almost as many words. Husbands, what's the verse say? Husbands, love your wives, and do not be harsh with them. So it's your turn, guys. What are the expectation that God has for us? All right? Well, for starters, it's right there in the passage. We are instructed to love our wives. This is the expectation that God has for us. The word used for love here is that really big word for love, which is agape. Right? It's not phileo. Phileo is like, hey, what's up, bro? Okay? Your relationship with your wife is not a, hey, what's up, bro, relationship. Okay? That's not it. It is agape. It is unconditional. It is no matter what happens in our lives, I am here for it. It's the same word that describes the love God has for us. We did nothing to earn it, and there's nothing that we can do to lose it. Here's the problem with the word love. We use the word love to describe all kinds of different things, right? Pizza, right? Where's all my pizza lovers? Put your hands up. There they are. Where's all my pineapple pizza people? Okay, yeah, I see you. Sports. Where's all my sports nuts? Right? Yeah. Some people love fishing. Some people love hunting. Some people love boating. Some people love makeup and hair and shoes. Sorry. Peter wrote it this way. Listen to what Peter said in 1 Peter 3:7. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you. Listen, heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. In Ephesians 5, verse 25, Paul said, "Husband, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." That's big. Hey, husbands, wannabe husbands, people that are aspiring to marriage, people that have been married for 10 years, 20 years, 30, 50, okay, whatever. I want you to listen to just a few things that I wrote down about how Christ loves the church. Number 1, sacrificially, right? It's a sacrificial love. Jesus gave himself for the church, and husbands, that's his expectation of us. It's a serving love. As the husband, the head of our home, we are to serve our wife. What does that mean? That means we don't bring work home with us. You say, oh, you don't understand the pressures of my job. No, you don't understand how disappointing it is, how discouraging it is to have you sitting at home but not be home. Does that make sense? You need to serve with love, faithful love. Faithful love. The love Jesus has for us is faithful, and he expects the same from us men to our wives. It's an understanding love. I don't know about you, but I read that one and I thought to myself, I really like that. Aren't you glad that God is understanding? Aren't you? Hey men, there's some of you guys in here, you're so dogmatic. Understanding is not a word that you could even begin to use to describe how you interact with your wife. Not understanding would probably be a better way to describe it. That's not how Christ loves the church. That's not how Christ loves the church. Caring love, the last one. Actually, no, I got a couple more. Caring love. Paul wrote this in Ephesians 5:28. In the same way, husbands love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. No one hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because, we are members of his body. Question, husbands, wannabe husbands. Think about it. Are you nourishing and cherishing? Will you be a nourishing and cherishing husband? And before you answer that, I want you to listen to this quote. This requires him to pay attention to her, to talk with her, to know what her hopes and fears are, what dreams she has for the future, where she feels vulnerable or ugly, what makes her anxious or gives her joy. A husband cherishes his wife in the way that he spends time with her and speaks about her so that she feels safe and loved in his presence. In my experience, this person said, a husband's caring love is one of the greatest needs in most marriages. A wife's heart is dried up by a husband who pays little attention to her, takes no interest in her emotional life, and does not connect with her. Husbands, are you cherishing and nourishing your wives? We all know people who struggle in this area. The wife walks into the room, she's in second place, she always looks like she feels out of place. She's a dried up flower instead of this glowing flower, growing flower that she's supposed to be. Sanctifying love. As husbands, we've been given the responsibility to help our wives grow in their walk with Christ. Yes, you are supposed to help with that. You are supposed to help her grow spiritually. I know we've got some younger people in the room, so I wrote this on purpose, a word of warning to dating and engaged couples. Here it is. It is not your responsibility to help your significant other to grow in their walk with Jesus. Not yet. Not yet. Don't rush that process. I know you think it is, but biblically that doesn't happen until marriage. Ask about their devotions. Encourage them to go to church. But I want to caution you. Everybody look at me real quick. All you young people, look at me. I want to caution you about jumping into a one-on-one book or Bible study. There is something incredible that happens when you begin to do those things together. A bond begins to form that, in my opinion, we can debate it afterwards. I'm right, but I'll talk to you anyway. A bond begins to form when you do those things that is not supposed to form until you say, I do. And breaking up or moving on becomes really difficult because spiritually, you already began to bond with this person. Does that make sense? Okay, a lot of heads are shaking. Good. Next one, consistent love. Jesus demonstrates a consistent love to us. We are to love our wives consistently. This is up and down. All right? This up and down, mad one day, attitude the next day. Listen, husbands, that's not what she needs from you. She needs consistency from you. Aren't you glad that God's consistent with us? Once again, that's who we're looking towards. That's who we're looking towards. A leading love. Lead your home. An enduring love. Don't quit. His expectation of us is that we will never give up on each other. Being a Christian husband, one person wrote, is not about being some prideful, self-absorbed leader, but a humble, self-giving servant leader. Number 3, children. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Everyone under the sound of my voice is someone's child. You might have a great relationship with your parents. You may have a non-existent relationship. You might have an awesome connection. They might know Jesus. They might not know Jesus. Obey. The word obey. Follow one's request. This is so important to God that He included it in the 10 commandments, the 5th commandment. Honor your father and mother, that your day may be long in the land that the Lord your God has given you. In the Old Testament, just as a reminder, disobedience to your parents had a very, very serious penalty. I think it's important to God because, once again, the foundation for respect and authority starts in the home. The moral fabric of any society can be measured by what's happening in the family unit. So the idea that you should never tell your child no or withhold discipline isn't consistent with how God sees the role of the parent. Right? And that's in a war with our current culture. The current challenges we're facing are because we've stopped parenting our children and started trying to be their best friends. That's going to come. That's going to come. We are entering that stage with our older children right now. But that part comes after providing structure, safety, and security. Children, all of us, stop pushing back on your parents. Unless they're asking you to do something against the Bible or morally wrong, God expects you to obey them. Well, I don't like their rules. Well, interesting that there isn't an asterisk next to this verse that says, unless you like the rules. There could have been. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God. God could have said, well, you know what, in 2023, there's going to be some things that are going to be really hard for you to hear from your parents. So guess what? I'm going to put an asterisk right here. So only if you like the rules do you have to follow them. Is that what it says? No. No. Honor your parents. How do I do that? Listening, behaving wisely, and representing your family well. Listening, behaving wisely, and representing your family well. What does he say next? Fathers. Fathers, don't provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. The flip side to the command for children to obey their parents is that the parents are responsible for raising their children in the fear and the admonition of the Lord, not them. Does God provoke you and me? Does He? Does God provoke you? No. Does He shower you with negativity? No. That's not who He is. And as a father, I haven't always done this one well. As your children get older and you realize how much like you they really are, it's difficult. But the verses that I read previous to this, compassionate heart, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, all of those things built into my life as a father. If I'm seeking those things, if I want those things to be a regular part of my life, and if I apply them, it becomes easier to raise our children without exasperating them. So what should I focus on as a parent? Be reasonable. Be reasonable. Don't lord your authority over your kids. Be loving. Your kids need that from you at any age, by the way. Pray for them. And with them. We were driving back from North Carolina when our kids were little. We had a Ford Explorer. We were coming up into Charlotte, heading south. And all of a sudden, boom, the head gasket blows on the truck. Remember that story? White smoke billowing behind us. I look up and there's a sign that says Dale Earnhardt Boulevard. I was like, praise God. There's an engine down this road. I'm going to go get... No. Got out of the car, walked off the exit ramp, went into a convenience store, sat down in an aisle with a full-size cardboard cutout of Dale Earnhardt Jr., and with my children, prayed and asked God to meet our needs. Lynn's dad had just passed away. There were all these things that were going on. But if you talk to my kids, they'll be like, remember that time we knelt down in a convenience store and there was that cardboard cutout of that one guy? That's okay. Pray for them. Pray with them. They're going to remember those things. Make sure your kids know what that they matter to you more than your work. I would come in the door and my kids would be so excited. Lynn would say, just give him 10 minutes. Just give him 10 minutes. And I would go back in the bedroom and I would lay on the bed and I would go, God, I have no energy for these 3 kids today. And I would come out of the bedroom and my son would come up to me and say, take your glasses off. Because in my house, if you took your glasses off, there was a flat-out wrestling match getting ready to go down right now. For the record, if any of you ask me that this week, I'm not wrestling you, okay? No, not going to happen. Hey, parents, practice what you preach. Don't discipline out of anger. Have some fun with your kids. Have some fun with your kids. Take the hood of a car, tie a chain to it, put it behind a four-wheeler, and drag your kids around the yard. Or don't, if you're not into redneck things like that. But we are. My kids will still talk to you about that. Go all the way to Michigan and expect snow and not have any? That's okay. We don't care. It can be 20 degrees. We're still going to dress up like there's snow and we're going to ride around and we're just going to get muddy. We don't care. Have fun. Have fun. Look for opportunities to share what God is teaching you. Important spiritual decisions. Places where you made commitments to the Lord. Real quick, it is not your pastors, youth pastors, Sunday school teacher, small group leader, or Christian school teacher's responsibility to teach your children biblical truth. I'm going to read that one more time. Wannabe moms and dads, remember this. It is not your pastors, youth pastors, Sunday school teachers, small group leader, or Christian school teacher's responsibility to teach your children biblical truth. What they hear from those people, listen, what they hear from those people should only reinforce what they've already heard at home. Which would mean what? It is your responsibility to teach your children biblical truth. We've given away a lot of responsibility as parents, haven't we? I would say too much. We were too trusting, too hopeful maybe, too busy, didn't want to get involved in all that. Real quick, I'm going to skip the whole part on work stuff, okay? I'm going to go to the end because it's time's up. A couple of questions. Wives, future wives, what did God say to you today? What did God say? You say, oh, Rich, when I come, I just want to listen. Really? What did God say to you, and what are you going to do about it? Husbands, future husbands, what did God say to you today? What did He say? And what are you going to do about it? Children, what did God say to you, and what are you going to do about it? Fathers, what did God say to you, and what are you going to do about it? If we get to the point where we are just consumers of information, there's a warning actually in the Bible. It says, listen, be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. What did God say today? What do I need to do different in my life? Not because of anything Rich Andrews said, but because of what the Word of God says. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me? The band's going to come back up. Heads are bowed, eyes are closed, nobody's looking around. I said it multiple times today, but the key